I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 9th, 2017, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were a couple of items in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, you had the presentation for this evening's Heart Zone Monitors report from our high school physical education department. There were some additional personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, and change in assignment. And that is your table file for October 9th.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. If there's no objection, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? Okay. Seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet minutes of the regular school board meeting held on Monday, September 25th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? Moved by Margaret. Is there a second? Second by Rob. Any discussion or comments regarding the minutes? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the regular school board meeting held on Monday, September 25th, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I have two announcements this evening. The first is that Northfield Middle School celebrated Farm to School Month by hosting a cafeteria tour and lunch for farm and food business partners, school administrators, and legislators last Thursday. In attendance was the Minnesota Department of Agriculture Assistant Commissioner Andrea Baubel, Minnesota Department of Agriculture Representative Ashley Bress and Alana Yust, House of Representatives, local representative David Bly, Child Nutrition Director Stephanie Strummy, School Board Chair Julie Pritchard, and myself. Last January, Northfield Public Schools received an Agri-Farm to School grant from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture to purchase cafeteria equipment to serve more Minnesota-grown foods. The tour highlighted the new equipment and farm to school items featured on the menu. Several of Northfield Public Schools farm and food business partners came, including Thousand Hills Cattle Company, Upper Lakes Foods, and Johnny Pops. The goal of these grants is to increase sales of Minnesota agricultural products to elementary schools, secondary schools, and early childhood providers. The grants stimulate purchases of locally grown and raised foods by creating plans to identify product availability and cost, the specific equipment needs to purchase, prepare, and serve more Minnesota-grown and raised food. And in addition to state funding, the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota committed funds to help with the project. In total, the grant funded approximately $11,000 toward the purchase of a combination oven steamer and a countertop freezer. Some of the farm to school products served with Thursday's lunch included Thousand Hills hot dogs, corn on the cob, watermelon radishes, spinach, fireside apples, and Johnny Pops. And it was really a neat thing to talk with representatives from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Ed. They're very proud of the program, and as we know, there's a real push to make sure that we have an opportunity for students to understand about locally grown and raised and sourced food, and it's really a great way for us to engage our students with it. So thanks to Director of Child Nutrition Stephanie Strummy for hosting that event for us last Thursday. And then in addition, just want to remind folks that next week, October 16th through the 20th, is the annual National School Bus Safety Week. And, you know, as we know, in the last couple of years, there was a major change in terms of new legislation regarding stop arms. And so from Benjamin Bus, I have just a couple of pieces I'd like to read from about stop arms, because that's a real significant piece in student safety when it comes to transportation. So this piece of data came from I believe this came from the Minnesota State Patrol. During the annual school bus stop arms survey last spring, 3,659 school bus drivers across the state reported 703 stop arm violations in one day.
Oh.
In the past 6 years, law enforcement officials have written almost 9,000 stop arm violations, and we know that that's just a number that's way too high. And so we know that it's far safer for kids to be on a school bus than other kinds of transportation, but it's when they get outside the bus where this can be an issue. And so we just want to take this opportunity, as we're talking about National School Bus Safety Week, to remind folks that in Minnesota, motorists must stop at least 20 feet from a school bus that is displaying red flashing lights and an extended stop arm. And then motorists should slow down and begin to stop when they approach a school bus with yellow flashing lights. And the best way for motorists to be aware of their surroundings at all times and to put the distractions away. So again, National School Bus Safety Week, we know it's the safest way for kids to get to school, but despite that, I think we have some more work to do to educate people about what the yellow and the red flashing lights mean. So those are your announcements for this evening.
Excellent. Board members have any other announcements? I just wanted to add, the Farm to School event was really incredible, and of course to compliment Stephanie Stromey and her staff, because they, complimented them numerous ways and numerous times in how well and easy they are to work with. And I think it's just an example of how dedicated our staff is to finding opportunities, because that grant money was significant in buying those pieces of equipment. So, and in talking to one of the representatives, there's only about 20% of the school districts in the state that are taking advantage of this program at this point. So once again, Northfield always, sort of on the cutting edge of finding opportunities that, help with, our fiscal and our financial situation, but also really in the best interest of kids. So it was really, really good food too. So, and I see our health teachers were kind of excited about the menu and the watermelon radishes, which were actually really, really good. And we, of course, thank Northfield News for doing a great story.
Yes.
Philip was there and took some good pics and had a nice article in the paper, so it was all good. Okay, so we will move on now to items for discussion. We have here, which will be just a reminder, the PowerPoint for their presentation is in the table file, but we welcome high school physical education teachers John Sand, Doug Davis, and Leah Sand.
Hi, we are the bio teachers at the high school, Doug Davis, John Sand, and myself, Leah Sand. And we're just here to share with you tonight the heart rate technology that we have in our Phy Ed class, how we got it, how it's going, things like that. So it's called IHT Spirit, or we might call them Adidas in the Zone or Zone Monitors, any of those things, it's all the same. These are our devices. It's just a wrist strap. There's no chest strap or anything like that, and that's what they look like. The blue is below the zone, the yellow is in the zone, and the red is above, but we can talk about that in a little bit. So in the spring of 2016, not last spring, but the spring prior to that, all three of us attended the National SHAPE Conference. We were really fortunate that it was in Minneapolis, and we were specifically looking for heart rate technology. What kind of heart rate technology could we use in our class, and what would work for us? We came across the IHT Spirit. We liked it because it was didn't have a chest strap. It was just a wrist wearable device kind of thing, and it also came with some software. So we wrote a proposal to try to get these as soon as we could, and found out, wow, that's not really how it works. But we did pull some money from the Phy Ed budget, a high school budget, and a couple different district budgets to get one classroom set of 40 monitors, and we were really excited about that. And then as the spring progressed, Matt Hillman found a grant through the hospital and was able to take our proposal and fill that in. And so the hospital awarded us additional monies to get 2 more classroom sets of monitors. And with that came some training. So right now what we have is each of us has 40 devices. We have our own classroom set of monitors. We originally had 2 card readers. We've since purchased another one, so we all have our own card reader. This is how the students check in and out the device, so it's personalized to them. We have 5 charging cases. That's how we just keep them alive. They have to be charged. And then it comes with software. And the software is really user-friendly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. With that, in the fall of 2016, we had a go-to meeting that came with the first 40 devices, and that was just really kind of basic. How do you log in? How do you create a class? That kind of thing. But with the grant that we got through the hospital, we had actually on-site training. A person from IHT came in, and we'd been using them for a month then. We had some troubleshooting time. We looked at fitness assessments. We can create our own, and FitnessGram is already in there too, and so it's just really unlimited what we can do. Talked about goal setting. How do we change the zone if a student is really fit and they're having a hard time getting into the zone? How do we change the zone if a student is not so fit and they're just always in the zone? And then like lessons we can put into the software and things like that. So that was really great on-site training. So here's some of the things that the system does for us. We'll talk about each one individually. The first one is instant feedback, and this was just so cool to us. After the students check in all their devices, we say update and save, and then within a minute to 2 minutes of that last student turning in their device, they get this email. And their parents get this email, or their guardians. If we have that email in our system in Skyward, it's now in our system in IHT. And so their parents and them get this email, and it shows them, the bar graph on the left was the goal for the day. So the goal was for them to get 21 minutes in the zone, and this particular student is Raven, I don't even know who that is, but she got 33 minutes total. 28 of them were yellow, and 5 of them were red. And it doesn't matter, that's all counted as time in the zone. So, but they get this instantaneous feedback. Along with that, they get a line graph that shows how their heart rate fluctuated throughout the activity. The other thing it does is there's the software, so we can really create any assessment we want. It can be a skill assessment, it can be a fitness assessment, it's really anything we want it to be. And then the database that goes with it. When we import our students from Skyward, we use their student ID numbers. So in IHT, that's how they're identified. And so if you are a freshman, that same information that you did as a freshman is going to be with you when you're a sophomore, a junior, and a senior. So it collects data longitudinally. Principal reports is another one of the capabilities. So this is really small and hard to read, but the farther the bar graph is over, the better the student has done. So it's different assessments. We can print reports by individual, by class, by grade level, and by district. We have a district login too, along with each one of us has our own personal login for our students, so we could do what does our district look like as a whole on the PACER kind of thing. The last one is it does come with some student and teacher materials, and that's just good because it talks about the zone monitor specifically that they'll be using then, the colors of the zone and what it looks like and things like that. So moving on, improvements and additions to PE. So this has really changed. We had them from October last year, so it's been 1 year now that we've had these devices. And we've already done some really great things, and there's more things to come. So one of the first things we did was we added this Know Your Numbers. We purchased blood pressure cuffs, and the kids do their own blood pressures in class. They also do height and weight and figure out BMI, and they determine their maximum heart rate. Their resting heart rates on the blood pressure too. If it seems like that blood pressure number is not so great, we have them repeat it in class. If we've done it 2 or 3 times in class and we're still like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't seem like a really good number, we send them to the nurse. And then the nurse does a more thorough sit down for 5 minutes and does the blood pressure then. So this is one of our additions. We're pretty excited about that, more about like measuring my health and what does that mean for me and what kind of numbers can tell me how healthy I am. Another thing that we have, we're all on the same page with a time in the zone assignment. So this Bill Batman is a student. This is what the computer looks like when they sign in their device. So it says, hey, welcome to class kind of thing. And then the bar graph, that's their goal for the day. So they know the moment they sign in the device how much time they're supposed to get in the zone. So we're using this as a daily assignment. Whenever they wear the monitors, there's a goal of time that they're supposed to get in the zone every day. And they know exactly what that is from the moment they start. Other things is it allows us a little bit more of a blended focus. So it's not just, well, how did you do in the volleyball unit or the nitro ball unit? It becomes more personal to them. We have some Build a Better Body. I know that we spend time in warm-ups now more intentionally doing strength training or cardiovascular activities and talking about the benefits of that. The green and the work rest red thing is a Tabata example. So I don't know if you've ever done any high intensity interval training, but we do that as well. And then there's just that brain at the bottom talking about, physical activity is great for so many reasons. It engages the brain more. It can even build new brain cells. So pretty important, cool stuff that we're doing. And that brings us to this year. So this is our PLC goal for this year. And I'm going to read it to you because it's kind of lengthy. By repeatedly experiencing time in the zone, we will increase the understanding of the benefits of exercising in the target heart rate zone and aerobic activity of PE students so that 80% of students will meet the time in the zone goal when assigned, as measured by the Adidas Zone Monitors or the IHT monitor. And we'll collect that data both semesters until January and see where we're at. Other things that we're working on moving forward is journal responses. So they get those emails. Why? What are they going to do with that? So we want them to reflect on what was my engagement level, what did my fitness look like? How did that activity make it easy or hard for me to get in the zone? What could I have done if I wasn't in the zone? And then more lessons that are student fitness focused. So how does this apply to my life right now? How might this apply to my life in the future? So we're still working with them, we're still learning, we're still trying to figure out exactly what the perfect mix of it is, but I think it's going pretty well. Any questions?
Thank you. Great presentation. So board members, questions? Jeff?
A few questions, but what did you find for wearable technology that's out there? I mean, that's a boom business, so how did you come up with this particular brand, and et cetera?
So kind of interesting.
John, could you step to the microphone?
Oh, yes. There you go. Sorry. Interesting with the wearable. I remember I was working my master's about 3 years ago, and one of my classes was working on wearables, and we actually did research and look at what wearable technology was out there and whether or not it worked or didn't work and what it did for you. And like probably one of the most popular ones is Fitbit, right? So we see a lot of people have Fitbits. And interestingly enough, your cell phone, everybody's cell phone, if you carry it with you, has the ability to do just about everything a Fitbit does, and actually do it better was what most of the research showed if you just carry your cell phone on you. Of course, interestingly enough, my wife would attest to this. Females have a harder time with carrying their cell phone, I think, than males do most of the time. So and we actually thought about like the kids have cell phones. What if we just figure out a way for them to carry their cell phone, and we could do a lot. But cell phones don't do a heart rate, so they do steps. And so we did do a lot of looking into that. And then when we went to that SHAPE conference, that was our goal. We went to every single technology-based wearables. Polar was there. Adidas, this one was there. I'm trying to think.
Another one, I don't remember what it was.
There was about 3 or 4 different brands out there, and each one had probably something better than somebody else did. And that was one of our harder things to try to decide which one we thought was best. And honestly, I think it was the software was one of the biggest things, and the idea that it sent an email right back to the student, and it sent an email right back to the parent. And so that seemed really cool, that we could literally send information to the parents the second they get done with FIED, and they could see what their student was doing in class. So it was a little bit more the software, I think, that got us on the wearables versus the actual wearable technology itself kind of thing. And every one of the wearables is using basically the same technology, so it wasn't like one was necessarily better than the other as far as actually reading their heart rate.
So what do you figure the longevity is on that? And what was the investment to get these units?
To get all 120 was about $22,000 to $25,000. So the software comes with a licensing fee. Every 3 years we pay $100, which is pretty minimal. The devices that we have and so we've been asking those questions to IHT. The devices that we have for the first year, anything that has broken down or not worked, they've just replaced, no questions asked. With that, this is the first year that IHT has gone strapless. So the first year that they've just done wrist wearables, and last year we sent back 5.
I think it was about 5.
And this year we sent, right at the beginning of the school year when we came back from the summer, we sent back 5. But they've all been replaced. The cost of a new wrist thing, I don't know, I want to say it's like $130, but we have 40 intentionally. So our biggest class size ever has been 38. And they're, somewhere between 33 to 38. If we're lucky, 30 to 38. But so we have a little bit of wiggle room in that we have 40 for each class.
Great question. Other questions? Ellen?
So this is really interesting. I'm curious as to how the students responded since you've done it for a year, and then was it what you anticipated from what the students' response was?
All right, these are teenagers, all right, and these are watches and devices that they didn't get a chance to pick, and so I'm sure you can imagine the responses. It was mixed because it's something new that they're not used to. They're used to coming into class dressed and just ready to go. Now there's a procedure, a protocol they have to follow, and they actually got a device now that's going to actually kind of hold them accountable to their own behaviors. One of the reasons that we really wanted to go to this technology as well is so that when we have a discussion with a student about intensity level, participation, effort level in class, or you want to get to the point where you're trying to give them some authentic assessments, that the assessment piece that we were providing for them wasn't subjective. Just as us looking at them and passing like a judgment about, you didn't look like you were working that hard, or you did look like you were working that hard. Even though we are, teachers of 20-some years, and we've worked with high school students, and we've watched them, fit kids, not fit kids, participate at different levels, and we get a generally good sense of how they're doing it. These here will be individualized to each person, and so we tried to sell it on, this is going to give you some very powerful data and some immediate feedback. It's going to let you know how hard you're working. You might even be shortchanging yourself, thinking that you're not working that hard in class, but yet this is going to show that your heart rate is actually where it's at. You're working hard. You're doing everything that we've asked you to do. You just need to keep that up. And so we figure that it's probably going to be about a 3 or 4 year cycle before that's the only thing that they've ever known. And so that's when they come in, they just expect it, and it's just part of the routine. We still have a few kids that will grouse about it, but for the most part, the students are starting to buy into it. And on days now when we're not using it, because there will be days when we're down, if we're doing a little bit more instruction time, they'll be asking, are we not using the monitor today, Mr. Davis or Mrs. Sad? And so it's a slow process, but in year 2, generally pretty positive. I think most of the students are enjoying it and they're having a good time with it.
I have to add to that. I think my favorite conversation about this right now is, mine's not working. It's not working. This isn't the right number. And my response is, oh, well, how often have you had a heart rate monitor on? Like, what kind of experience do you have with that? Well, none. Okay, so maybe it's right. And they look at me like, no, it's not right. But that's my favorite conversation.
And that's one of the biggest things too with the technology. And I've had the same kind of conversation with a few of my students where they'll say, Mr. Davis, I don't think this watch is reading right. This looks like this heart rate is pretty high. And I'll say, all right, well, this is what the technology is saying right now. I said, let's go old school. Let's go find your pulse, either your carotid artery or your brachial artery. Let's test it. And I've done this probably a dozen times this fall with a variety of different students. And they'll say, I don't think this monitor is reading right. And we'll take a pulse and we'll come up and we'll like, you're beating at 135 beats per minute. Your watch is showing about 138, 140. It's pretty accurate. And they'll be like, wow, I didn't realize that. It's like, yeah. Either it's, you think you're more fit and maybe your heart needs to be strengthened, or you realize that you're a pretty fit individual, and if you really want to move that peg and you want to challenge yourself a little bit more so you can really push your fitness levels, you might have to work a little bit harder than you think, just because you're already a fit person, and so your bar is a little bit changed. And so it opens up a lot of conversations for us to have with students of every ability level and to give them some things to work with.
Excellent. Okay, Amy, you had a question.
My question was similar to Ellen's, but I think I'm going to take it just one step further now that you basically answered it. So do you find that the monitors motivate the students to work harder, do more, get more fit?
I used them today. And in my 7th hour class, the kids came in and put them on, and it depends, but there were 7 boys just running. From the moment they put it on, I'm going to get 30 minutes. So yes. And then on Mondays in my class, we do a timed run. We do different warm-up activities every day. And I can say to the students, if it's, so some kids were walking. I said, your device better be yellow or red if you're walking. And they're like, it is, look at it, it's yellow. Because they were working really hard for them. And so they feel validated that the teacher's telling me I can walk because I've done a lot of work already, right? So I think yes, for both the kids who want to be like, I'm going to bust this thing, and the ones that are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to wear this, they're finding, oh, this is actually kind of nice for me. The teacher knows that I'm doing just as much work as everybody else is.
I love that answer because the non-athletes don't get, I don't know, teased or looked down on or whatever. They are doing what they can do. So
Well, and that was one of the selling points too when we went to this national conference, because just by some a sheer stroke of luck, the gentleman that we saw that was presenting for Adidas at this conference was also named Doug, but he was a representative from New York. And so he came in and he did his presentation, and he was able to talk to us about a very conversation he had with one of his students where they set their zone goal for the day and they went out there and they went exercising, and this person came in and they had spent like maybe 50% of their time up in the red, which is above the zone, meaning they're working pretty intense. And he's like, it's okay to dial it down a bit. You're working pretty hard, either because you're either maybe not feeling well or you're not as fit as the rest. This truly is the goal. So we're giving students in an individualized basis that permission to find out what is their health enhancing level of intensity, and then, all right, you need to go meet it. For some of you, it might be like you're out there running a race, and for other ones, it might be just, a strong walk or a little bit upper, intensity level activities, but everybody's going to find that place and have some success doing it that way.
Excellent. Margaret?
I have a lot of questions. I think this is great, but I'll pick my 2 favorites. One, I'm assuming these get sterilized with fears of MRSA, that they get sterilized in between uses.
They can wipe them down as they put them away. Yep,
Okay.
wipes right on the cart.
Okay. And my second one is, how safe is this data?
You mean
Safe as in like HIPAA
as,
safe?
No, safe as in not hackable. Like somebody
Oh.
can't get in there and see somebody else's personal data.
That's a great
That's
question.
a great question. So the system software, it all has a login. So we have a username and a password. We actually have a different username and a password for our coordinator access. Like if I want to print district reports, I have to log in differently. I guess because I'm not in charge of the software, I'm not sure I can speak to the safety of it, but it was made for public school use. And so I'm assuming that they've covered all their bases with the safety of the data. Kids don't have access, like kids can't get into the software and see the results. I would have to give them a principal report.
Okay. Or they get emailed a
Yeah.
And the only
downloadable.
email they get is of their daily activity. We don't email out fitness test scores or skill assessment scores or anything like that. It's just that daily goal.
Okay.
So,
We could check into that, but like
Yeah.
I would assume it'd be just like Google. Like if you're storing stuff on their cloud, wherever they're storing their cloud, it's an internet-based system where we log onto their internet site and everything gets stored on their site. Similar to like for athletic training, I have Impact where we do concussion testing and it's all on their website that's saved and I have to have a login. So I'm assuming it would be pretty much standard as that. Could Google get hacked or could?
Yeah.
Well, I think the key
Yeah.
thing with data, there's this kind of data security is a growing field, and it's a field that is evolving. These software products are typically protected by secure, encrypted kinds of login and those kinds of things. There's some reasonable human steps that have taken place to ensure that a few people who are trustworthy, our teaching staff who we trust with kids every day, are the ones who have access to the data. But I think we all just know that while the security on this kind of thing really improves, I think that if you think about hackers, I think there's much more value in Equifax data than there is in Northfield High School. But the truth is, the United States government has been hacked, the most sophisticated cybersecurity in the world. They've had it, but I think we're relatively safe with our students. And even if someone were to have access to it, we're not talking about health information. You're talking about a vital sign, which is different. And I'm comfortable at this point. This security technology is similar, as John said, to other things that are in the field. Though you will hear much more about security of student data in the next year to 2 years. It is the next piece that we'll be dealing with from what I know will be a regulation perspective.
Not that I would ever think it was the target, but I was just thinking,
Yeah.
between students, they're not going to
right, yeah,
see
they
each other's
can't log in.
BMI and
Right,
things
yeah.
like that.
No.
Well, I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah.
I heard him say it doesn't. Do you collect BMI?
Well, we do height and weight. We take their height and weight, we put it in, the system does calculate
Yeah,
their
this
BMI.
page.
Yes.
Yeah.
But their BMI score is not on there, and their weights is the last thing that they do. From taking their weight, their piece of paper goes to us, and then the paper doesn't come back out to anybody. So.
Right.
Thank you.
And I guess, Ellen, or Julie, when you were talking earlier about the food program that they did at the middle school and about how only 20% of the schools in the state were kind of taking advantage of this, so we're again kind of out in front of the trend here. Northfield, again, in this particular case, will, I guess, tout that same type of a designation. The number of wrist monitors that we have ordered and that we have purchased for our school set is unique. There isn't another high school out there that I think purchased this. So when we ordered this particular set, and we had the numbers put out there, they had to come in and they didn't have stickers going up to the high enough in volume. And we were one of the first high schools of our kind, I think, in the nation to jump into this. And so we're still learning as well on the front end of this as the technology grows and as we get really comfortable with it, but we're out there seeing the value of this and having, again, this ability to communicate with the parents, communicate with the students, compile this data. So we decided that this, we liked the idea, we liked what it saw, we liked what it offered. And so again, we took the chance to kind of put ourselves out there, and we'll see how it goes.
Excellent. Other questions, board? No.
This question is coming from a tragedy that happened to a relative in our family where a 16-year-old was doing sprints in football and died from an unknown heart problem. Would this kind of thing, would that reveal any kind of thing? Who's privy to the information that might be revealed here?
Well, as teachers, we're going to get this data here collected, and as Leah alluded to earlier when we talked about the Know Your Heart data, one of the things that we're trying to make a shift to, because nationally wise now, the whole kind of physical education curriculum, the standards are kind of making some shifts in the move now to account for some of the changes in health education and just health and wellness as a whole. And so the whole idea about making them aware of some of the very simple standards or numbers that they might see if they went to a doctor's office and had to visit their blood pressure, height, weight, resting heart rate, to give you just normal information about just how well you are. I guess in allowing them to do this on a more frequent basis and having, just looking at the data, would we catch it? Are we trained in seeing that? No, we're not trained physicians. However, if a heart condition like that or something like that would present itself like in a high blood pressure or a bizarre resting heart rate, and we saw that repeatedly, we might have been able to refer that person on to a more qualified physician, a nurse, or even encourage them to go see a specialist, which is what we're hoping to go with this, or the student themselves. As they start to understand more about what is normal healthy data, they start to take ownership in their own kind of package. They take a look at this and say, I kind of know now what normal numbers are for blood pressure and resting heart rate for my age and gender. This seems a little high. Maybe it'll start a conversation with us, a conversation with a nurse or at home to say maybe I need to go have this checked out. So we're trying to really give them those tools to make some good lifelong decisions.
Excellent.
To piggyback on that, with my other side of my job, those heart conditions that athletes pass away from are really hard to find. The NCAA has made some changes in their rulings or in their health physicals over the last few years, where they are now looking at and trying to, and one of the issues is even like doing EKGs don't always catch it, or they give the false positives for, again, dealing with those congenital heart issues that cause people to pass away from athletics. I know Austin had a football player this year that passed away, one of the freshmen, and we would never catch any of that, and physicians have a hard time catching those things and knowing whether or not it'll actually come across. But like he was saying, the know your numbers, the blood pressures, and some of that stuff would catch a few people that, and we've sent a few people to the nurse that said, this is really high, but those more complicated ones, no, it wouldn't.
So you might be sensitive to a spike that you would see which would cause you to...
Yeah, there could be something that, if something, we're working with the data, we could see something that alarmed us and said, we'd say, talk to the parents or talk to the nurse and get something going, absolutely.
Other questions or comments? Dr.
I have a
Hammett?
couple because I can't
Absolutely.
resist. First of all, if you think about all of the things that we talk about at the board level and talk about good instruction, you think about motivated teachers who are using research to inform their practice. This is very clearly an example of that. When we look at people who are saying we want to use data with our students, and then not only use the data with their students, but we're going to get people to go to the next level of higher order thinking and reflect on that data. That's involved in this. We talk about this may be one of the best examples of effective technology integration that we have to show. Again, seeing a need that there's no way could you have done this efficiently to complete within one class period if you did not have the technology. You could not. There's no way in God's green earth you could do it. So, the fact is that this is an excellent example of a really high impact instructional strategy that has long-lasting impact for students that they could not do without the heart rate. That's the definition of effective technology integration. They're thinking about things about brain engagement, all these things, and look at their SMART goal. It's one of the best SMART goals that it's almost like one of you teaches new people how to write SMART goals. That'd be Leah. So authentic objective assessment, right? Everything, if you think about everything that we've talked about as part of our strategic plan and about where we want to go, you can check every single box with this. And so I'm really proud of the work that our high school Phi Ed department has done. And we'd be remiss if we did not publicly thank Northfield Hospital again for partnering to allow us to do this, because I think they saw the innovative spirit, they saw the potential to help the health of our students, and this is also very clearly personalized learning. And we're teaching kids that it's continuous, those things for your whole life. So I'm just thrilled. I couldn't be more thrilled. Thanks for all of your work. Thanks for your vision, to see the opportunity. Thanks for reaching out and asking how could we make this happen and what other support do we need. All the way around, it's a feel-good piece. And it's good for kids, of course, which is what we're here
At the end
for.
of the day, that's what it's all about. Thank you. This is really, really exciting. I think you can tell from the number of questions and the positive energy coming from the board. This is really good stuff, and we really commend you. And, I was just thinking about the know your numbers. And, when you think of, as Amy, alluded to, you have D1 athletes down to those who, aren't necessarily that active, but the know your numbers for that entire spectrum of kids is super important. And it's something that will continue. Again, the lifelong skill that you're giving them, it's incredible. I mean, we're just really, really thrilled. Thank you for your initiative and for your forward thinking. And my question was, how many high schools do you think are doing this? And it sounds like virtually maybe a handful, if that.
If that. Yeah.
So again, cutting edge for Northfield School District. So excellent. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time and
Thank you
everything
for the
you're doing
time.
for kids. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we will move on to, that is actually our only item for discussion and report this evening. So we'll move on to item for individual action. It is an item for individual action, so I will ask if there's a motion to approve the recommended co-curricular additions and modifications as detailed in a document dated September 25th, 2017, and updated on October 4, 2017 by Superintendent Dr. Hillman. Is there a motion? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Rob. Okay, so any board members who have questions or comments, particularly, again, just to note that it was updated from the original version that we saw at the prior board meeting.
And then just to highlight that
Dr. Hillman,
change,
yeah.
there's only one, the only change in the whole document is under total additions and increases on the bottom of the first page. So while the total cost is $14,005, our ever prescient and looking at things finance director wanted me to make sure that I include the statutory benefits that would go along with that. So that would be for TRA and FICA. So the actual total would be $16,127 when the statutory benefits are included.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments about the motion? Margaret?
I'm sorry, I was not at the last meeting,
Okay.
and I shredded the packet before I realized I needed to look this up, and then I looked at the minutes, I couldn't find it. I trust the work of the committee. It's a great work. I just have one little question. I'm just wondering why we need additional responsibility and time for a defensive football coordinator when all the others state the reason as additional students participating, and this one doesn't state a reason. So I'm just asking a reason.
Yeah, and so I think the reason in that particular case is that as with all activities, especially something like football, which involves some of the most number of students that we have in any activity, from time to time there are modifications of responsibilities within that particular organization. And I think it's pretty safe to say that our football team probably has the most number of coaches involved. And so this was a change that was made in terms of how they structure managing that piece, and as a result of the additional time that went along with that particular piece. So this is the first one, and you're right, there's a number of them about the number of students. This is one example where there's change in the structure. This won't be the last time that happens, it just happens to be the first time.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Rob?
I guess my one comment is just that I think it would be helpful to just have the schedule included with this so that we understand what level E, level C, et cetera, is because, so when you have football move one assistant coach to coordinator level, you move from E to C. Total cost is $883. That's on top of what they're already getting, right?
That's correct.
Right. So this makes it look like you move from assistant coach as a football coach to assistant to a coordinator, and you get $883, and you become an assistant coach of the dance team, and you get $3,198. And it would be just good to understand like what the context is for those numbers.
And this is great feedback because, again, this is the first time that we have brought this to the board under the new collective bargaining, after the new collective bargaining agreement was settled. So that's really good feedback. And what we'll be trying to do, of course, with this one, as you saw, we're trying to create kind of a template for when we bring these kinds of changes to you, that we will have a similar process. And that's great feedback because this is not something, I anticipate you'll probably have this happen, on average, I'm going to guess twice a year. In terms of that we may have, and this will, I'm sure, will be the longest list you ever have. You'll may be looking at 1 or 2 positions, at a time as we move forward. So including the schedule, I think, will be a very important piece, and we'll make sure we take that down and use that as we move forward.
Excellent feedback, Rob. Thank you. Amy.
So I have a couple comments.
Yes.
First, I'm under the DECA advisor. I'm
Yes.
wondering how many students are involved.
I see that I left that X there, so I don't have that particular answer for you, but what I can tell you is that DECA program has grown significantly over the past several years, where I know it's several dozen students participating.
So do we have a sense of once a program gets to be a certain size, we should start paying the advisor?
No, this is an interesting example, and this is one that we're also going to have to talk about, in terms of as we move forward from a procedural perspective. And I'm just going to take it one step higher organizationally to talk about it rather than talking about a specific activity. One of the things that we have happen from time to time is, out of the goodness of people's hearts, there's an effort to create a activity, and people begin by volunteering their time. And so this has happened, I would say, conservatively with 3 to 5 programs since I've been in Northfield over the last decade, probably 3 to 5 programs that I can think of off the top of my head, where something was, began as a volunteer piece, and then what happened is it became very successful and it grew beyond being a labor of love, to an actual real, assignment where there were more and more things that came to the person's plate, that is work, and so one of the pieces that we'll be looking at is that we will ensure that when we have a volunteer process with this, that we're going to need to develop an approach to a shelf life of how long can the activity be run as a volunteer activity until we make a decision as an organization that, yes, this is worthwhile and we'll pay for it, or we think it's been worthwhile but we haven't seen the participation, and therefore if you want to run it through another organization or you look at it as a community ed activity or something like that, we could run it through that way, because when it's being volunteered for, we want to make sure that there's a schedule to address it. So in this case, DECA has been around 5 or so years, and I think it has been so successful that there's been multiple students who have gone to national events, things far beyond the scope of what the original intent was, all good, and it made just complete sense to say, okay, this is really now something that is beyond that small group of people that met, and there needs to be some compensation for that. The number of students involved, that's a very tricky thing to say, because in some activities, depending on the amount of supervision, you may need to add staff in smaller increments than another activity, if that makes sense. So we're going to have to rely on the co-curricular committee, which is a group that will provide me the recommendations that I will filter and then bring before you. So that's going to really have to be on a case-by-case basis, depending on the activity, depending on the number of students involved, and the kinds of things that need to take place to make that happen.
Okay, that answers that question that I had. And then I had one more comment. I'm always for taking things off the books.
Yep.
Thank you for that. But as I look at this list, it seems to me that the middle school is losing out and the high school is really gaining from additions. And I'm happy that we're doing this process, but is there any sense that the middle school is going to be coming back with, all right, we've lost all of these positions, but we have these really cool things in the work that we want covered.
So I think the other thing with this particular list is not to remember with the recommended reductions, this doesn't take into account all the other things that have been added or changed over the years. So one example is the middle school newspaper is coming off. Well, that particular program was no longer needed because it shifted to a TV show program that is now a class. So that particular piece, was not something that was needed. It had not been done in several years, and there's now an alternative that is just as important, if not, maybe even better than what we had before. So this is the current list. It's not a balance sheet, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so, and again, things had been left on the list for a number of years. And I think, we have the middle school talent show, for example. No one that can remember the last time that there was a middle school talent show. But I also think that you've seen that we have now had over the past several years a resurgence of having multiple theatrical productions at the middle school each year. So there's other creative ways for students to express that particular piece as opposed to just a talent. So it's not a balance sheet, and we just know that things will ebb and flow over time.
So I don't want to add a lot of work onto anybody at all, but I'm curious, would there be an easy way of getting a sense of the total world of positions at some point in the future? And it doesn't have to
We actually have it.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I'd just be curious to see just where all of the different positions fall, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely, we can get that to you.
Thank you.
Ellen?
So just point of clarification, so we know that the co-curricular committee does all of this work, so, and procedurally, we actually have a board appointee that sits on with the, from the co-curricular committee goes to the...
Yeah, I don't think that the board doesn't have a rep on it.
So it doesn't go to the committee that...
The Activities Advisory Committee?
Advisory
It does
Committee.
not.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that we will learn is that, remember, that this used to filter through the collective bargaining process. So we have the pieces in place where the co-curricular committee will still, make their recommendations, to me. My job will be to filter those based upon what we know is happening in the rest of the district at that time, bring those recommendations forward to you for your approval or not. And I think but as we learned tonight, there will be some things that to make this more of a strong procedure, we're going to learn a few things as we bring these pieces forward.
Jeff?
Follow up on Rob's suggestion, it would be very beneficial to just have an overview of all these levels and what they are.
Well, I think not only that, I think with Amy's comment, I think basically any time that we bring a change to you, there's nothing wrong with us bring the entire position grid and the pay structure forward to you. Because we're not doing it often enough where you're going to need to have that reminded.
I was just taking notes so I could remember what we were discussing. Yes, Rob?
So I'm just noticing that in the personnel items, we have a resignation for someone who's an advisor of an activity. So when that happens, clearly there's been a change in this, but that's not reflected here. So what happens with that if someone, in this case, advisor of the One Act Play resignation? So there's a decrease in the pay to this person. That pay goes back into the system, it gets paid to somebody else, or does it just kind of hang out there until we decide what to do with it, or how's that dealt with?
So I think it's an excellent question, and think of this, what we need to start thinking of is our activity advisors and coaches in the same way that we think of our teaching staff. So if we have, let's just say that we have 8 English FTE approved at the high school. If we have an English teacher who resigns, they will resign. We have that money set aside for the English, for the high school FTE. Position is posted, it's hired, and that person is, once you approve the hiring, that person is now paid based upon what the collectively bargained agreement says. So remember that the pay structure for this is still collectively bargained. That part, the pay, is still collectively bargained. We have a grid, a co-curricular grid of currently approved positions. And that was extracted from the collective bargaining agreement, now under your complete jurisdiction in terms of approvals and removing it. So when someone who is, let's take that One Act Play as an example, when someone resigns as that particular piece, yes, that money's still in the budget. That money stays there until such time where the person is hired and completes the activity. So no different than any of the other positions that you approve,
So it would only come
resignations.
to us in the form of this action is if we were eliminating one at play.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, that's exactly right, which I don't anticipate happening.
Excellent questions. Okay, so if there's any other issues around clarification or comments, has everyone had a chance to weigh in on the motion? Okay. So with a motion and a second, all those in favor of approving the co-curricular additions and modifications as outlined on the October 4, 2017 memo, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. As a procedural issue regarding the upcoming referendum election, we have to do a resolution appointing election judges for the November 7, 2017 school district special election. Is there a motion to approve the resolution appointing election judges for the November 7, 2017 school district special election and appoint the individuals specified on Exhibit A as judges at the combined polling places listed on Exhibit A? Moved by Margaret. Is there a second? Moved by Amy. This is a roll call vote.
Stratmore.
Aye.
Cornell.
Aye.
Colangelo.
Aye.
Iverson.
Aye.
Hardy.
Aye.
Gerwitz.
Aye.
And Pritchard.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Excellent.
And we want to thank Danita for her work in working with multiple jurisdictions to get our election judges. And so while the local jurisdictions, certainly Danita's done a lot of work making sure that we got it to this point. So thank you, Danita, for all of your effort.
Actually, who needs to be thanked are the township clerks in those three townships, Bridgewater, Greenvale, and Webster, because they're the ones who really recruited all of these people. And it was not easy.
And we thank them as well.
And so we thank them, really.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So those are the items for individual action. We'll now move on to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a few personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have two items for information. The enrollment report that was in your packet dated October 2017. Dr. Hillman.
So as you see, when you look at the October 2nd, which of course is a big date because a lot of things are generated based upon that October count, you'll see we've approached the cruising altitude of the enrollment for the years. We have a very similar number this month compared to what we had last month, or in the last one on September 22nd. So starting to settle in, which is a good thing, at 4,012 full-time students.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments regarding the enrollment report? Margaret.
I just find it interesting that we are growing despite a projection that we had been not growing. So statements to the contrary saying that we are not growing, there's your proof.
And when we look totally, we stay still, even though we're growing, we're still within that kind of flatter range. But as you said, we still have some time left in Hazel's projections over the next decade. But I think one of the pieces that we looked at is that we're at just approximately 100 more 6th through 12th grade students than we had projected. So even when you even did the cohort improvements or increases last year, moving them all up a grade, we had about 100 new 6th through 12th graders that we didn't have at the end of last year in 5th through 11th grade. So that's a pretty interesting statistic to see that does align with what Hazel Reinhardt has said. She said, well, we'd see some decline at the elementary. She saw our high school numbers growing a bit. And in this case, it has made it so the total overall is growing.
And I don't foresee our open enrollment status changing. So our numbers for open enrollment will stay strong, I imagine.
Open enrollment, it's a piece where you don't always know, but at the same time, the current data that we have and the trend that we've had over the past couple of years, I think would suggest that that's a fair statement.
keeping in mind that report will come out in the end of November. Okay. The enrollment options
Perfect.
report.
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions or comments? Okay, our second item. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not, again, I'm just looking at numbers, and I just find it interesting that the high school numbers went down by 16 people, and the ALC number went up by 22 people. So clearly, there's not a one-to-one thing there. Where did those 6 extra kids come from?
So I don't know exactly where they all came from, but I think something that's important to remember is that when you have an ALC, the ALC enrollment is not limited to your particular school district. So there are rules that provide opportunities for students from other school districts to attend our ALC. There's a number of different rules covering a number of different things. So students from there could be students not from Northfield who enroll in our ALC. And also it could be possible that we even have some students who maybe had left for a little bit, and are coming back and are re-enrolling in the ALC. It could be someone who maybe had chosen, maybe they didn't finish graduation or those kinds of pieces. But the bottom line is that it's not just Northfield High School students that go to our ALC. It can be people from surrounding school districts, and it could be people who have maybe had made the choice to leave before and now are coming back through some of the credit recovery kind of programs.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to referendum update. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so what I want to be able to do is just share with you a couple of things here today, and then first of all, the notice of change in polling place, I understand, was delivered last week. Many people who are in those areas where their polling places are combined received the required notification. So as you know, this is part of this report is checking off the legal pieces as we go down the line. We understand that the notice of special election, remember that goes to every taxpayer, will be sent out tomorrow, because even though the state said today was the first day that it could be mailed, there is no mail on this federal holiday. So we anticipate those will be mailed tomorrow, and that homeowners or taxpayers will receive that, I would assume, sometime this week. We continue with the public presentations. And so I believe that I've counted that I think I completed the 20th community presentation this morning, counting another one that I wasn't at last week that Sam Murchison filled in for me. So we continue to try to get out and really share the good word with people in a variety of pieces. Today I had a chance to present at the Senior Center. So far I've had a range between one person to more than 50 at these presentations, and every one of them has been valuable. The one where there was one person, it was at the middle school 6th grade parent summit evening. I had a wonderful 20-minute conversation with this person who walked away saying, there are things that I didn't know about this that I now know I'm going to go talk to my colleagues about. So I think that we just continue to try to spread the good word, share it with people, and make sure people are informed. We've had a lot of comments, about the bond and levy guide in terms of pleased with the timing of the delivery and pleased with the information that it provided. And of course, when you have that also now prompts a whole other set of questions, which is great. And so one of the things that we are also doing this week, I anticipate it'll be done tomorrow, we'll be updating the frequently asked questions document on the website. And so this is something we had planned to do, relatively often throughout the project, but this is really our first major update since the end of August. And that is just around a piece I want to share with board members about some of the questions that have come forward about the renovation, the full renovation of the high school. And, when we talk about the dollars, the conservative $14 million in age-related maintenance and improvements that we've talked about with this building, and then we look at the history of how we got there, and many of us at the table know how we got there through 3 years of work, more than 24 meetings, innovative online procedure with thought exchange. We had some real clear data saying, please don't consider a lot with renovating the high school long term. But because we've had a few questions, we did go back to ATS&R, who helped us with the concept plans, and asked them to look at just some pieces. And I want to share with you that what the estimate, for that kind of renovation of this kind of facility, there's a lot of varying factors. But the estimates ranges from $38 million to $46 million. So we are at 50% and much higher than 50% in terms of the cost to renovate the building versus the cost to replace the building. So I know many board members have received that question or heard that question, and we felt even though, we had a lot of data early on to say that this was not a path that we were really interested in pursuing, we did want to get that data, we did want to look at that, and so, I think that that's a key thing that, yes, Ellen?
I don't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead, because otherwise I'll be on a roll, so.
So clarifying, the 38 to 46 million, so that's only construction costs, so would that, I would assume if you did something like that, you would have to deal with, so I'm thinking about if I was in the grocery store and somebody asked me, I'd say, well, it would, we actually know from the architect it would be this, but that, on top of that, you'd have to think about portable classrooms, which include bathrooms, things like that. And then I would assume that, so that would be on top of the 46 million, and that's a conservative estimate. And then on top of that, we were talking about like 2,000 students over the course of 3 years, like if you think about 3 years and the cohorts moving, at least 2,000 students who would have a disruptive and education that would, where we couldn't guarantee the quality. Is that what is that, kind of what we're hearing here with the numbers, and that doesn't include portable classrooms and things like that? Is that?
Yeah, everything you just said, Ellen, is very fair. I want to be clear that what I'm talking about in the estimate is what they in the industry call project cost, because when you look at the entire estimate for something like this, and even for new construction, there's the pieces that they're looking at about the construction cost, and then there are other fees and services that are above the construction cost, which equal the project cost. So I'm talking about project costs, but you're absolutely right. When you think about a renovation of a building of this size, as Jim Culseth, our buildings and grounds director, says, this doesn't happen between June 15th and September 2nd. So the fact would be that you would be looking at, I think, conservatively up to 3 years worth of time to renovate. And how they typically do this in buildings like this, they would basically kind of shut down one part of the building for an extended period of time to complete that work. Mind you, it would have to happen while school is going on. I mean, it would have to. You can't just do it over the summer. So yes, we'd have to find a place for the students to attend classes. The only way that we know how to do that would be to look at portable classrooms or leasing space in the community, all those different kinds of pieces. And portable classrooms in the old days, there were little requirements for them. Well, now they're required to be sprinkled. They're required to have a number of other things. The footings, my understanding, are now required to be similar to that of a permanent building. So we're not talking about, what you used to call, they were trailers that you'd pull in, and exactly that they are now required to have restrooms. Now we also have students in exacerbating a security circumstance, because now we have students who are going to have to travel from one part of the building outside to the other, and there might even be a way to create some kind of breezeway. I don't know the answer to that at this point, because, this is an estimate, but there are a number of issues. And yes, you could have a one cohort of students who spends 3/4 of their career in construction. And so while I believe in our teaching staff and I believe in their ability to be resilient, and I believe in our students' ability to be resilient, I think the reasonable person would also say that it's a pretty significant disruption in terms of trying to renovate a building like this to do the kinds of things that we want to do for teaching and learning. So I know several board members have received that question. It's something that's probably one of the most popular questions that I've seen. And so we felt it was our due diligence to make sure that we talk with people about it and share that. We'll be including that in the frequently asked questions document, and I'll be posting something on my school blog about it as well, just to try to explain that a little bit more. Margaret, you had a question?
So I just want to clarify for myself, because I'm putting it on my phone, so I have it with me at all times. 38 to 46 mil is the project cost, which includes the price of temp classrooms or leasing space. And
that does not include. It does not include.
Does not include.
That's correct.
Okay. Oh, and so that does not then include any busing. So if we had to lease space elsewhere for, say, FIED activities and so on, we'd have increased costs in busing as well. And that's not included in the 38 to 46 million.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I want to be clear, we would most likely look for portable classrooms, because not only the expense of transporting students to another location, but the inefficiency of lost time, would be a significant piece. So I really see the by far the option with that would be the portable classrooms on the site. But there's going to be some issues of where those go. What does it displace in terms of on the site? Those kinds of things. Should that be if that was a hypothetical piece to do as an intellectual exercise, all those things would be in play as you mentioned.
Okay, so does not include
It does not.
the
No.
additional cost we've just been discussing?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff?
I was wondering, with the high vac costs and I mean, the whole infrastructure underneath this school is 50-plus years old. So is that 36 to 46, is that replacing a lot of that or leaving it in place?
That would be some decision-making we'd get into as we go down the road further. The estimate that I have is mostly about the renovation of classroom space. We're not talking about changing the foundation. We are talking about some of the kinds of things that, this is where you start to cross over. The estimate would include things like changing out windows and things like that, but it does not include major renovation of under the building kinds of things. And I think the other piece is when you do get into that, a lot of the infrastructure systems, my understanding talking with a series of former buildings and grounds directors, is the fact that a lot of that is buried underneath. And so now there'd be the expense of making sure that is dug up and replaced and those kinds of things. So as we said, this is a renovation that would be a major renovation, but at the end of the day, you would still have a building of the vintage that we're at. It would not address all of the security concerns. It would put a new front office on. You could do that kind of piece to create a secure entrance. But because of fire code and things like that, we would still have 50 exits out of the building. That's at least 50 exits out of the building because of the fact that those doors need to be there by fire code because of the sprawling nature of the facility.
Other questions? Amy?
A couple of things. First, when you mention one cohort, I think you actually mean 2 classes of people, because you'd have like 650 students would spend all 3 out of their 4 years going through high school with construction the whole time, or a good share of it, right? So that's a lot. That's and affecting many more beyond that. But then the question I had about the renovation costs is,
And it's an estimate. I want to be really clear. This is an estimate.
But that's why it's so broad as well.
Correct.
But that does not include like an addition or anything, does it?
That would include some additional space because, and that's part of the range, is the fact that there are a number of pieces, for example, some kind of secure entryway, would be something we need to look at. And to create the kind of flexible learning spaces that we are eager to have, you don't have enough room within the current envelope then to recreate the same amount of space. So what our architectural partners tell us is that there would need to be some additions to the building in order to provide all of the kinds of space that we are proposing in new construction. It's a little counterintuitive, but it's think about that you're trying to create the flexible learning spaces within the same current box that we have. And to try to integrate that within the instructional area would be difficult.
And I remember, because I came sort of into this process in the middle, at one point the statement that there's really no logical way to add an addition onto the school. Do I remember that correctly? Okay.
Be very difficult.
Okay.
And we can't go up.
Yeah, we've actually had that question too, as to whether or not there's some there's some historical discussion about at least part of this building being constructed where a second story could be added. And we've had an engineer go through this a number of different times. They've looked at I didn't know these things before, but they look at the size of the joist, they look at whether it was concrete reinforced, and we have an engineering firm that says that the building was not designed to handle a second story.
Yep.
Noel, you have a question?
I have a comment to follow up on that. We looked at a building in which, as the architects that were showing us around talked about a building that was designed for a second floor. And they had designed it and it was constructed with that in mind, that it had overly designed and constructed foundations, utilities, services, and it had a pre-stressed deck rather than having steel and concrete and insulation and roof. It had another pre-stressed deck, knowing that there would be another complete set of building on top of it. And that was all with the intention that there would one day be a second story. This building doesn't have that. at all.
Yeah, and we actually went back to the original drawings. We submitted those original drawings to an engineer to review it. And again, we'd prefer to have those questions asked and answered. So I was really appreciative that the question came forward, because if there are some folks who think that that may have been the case, we want to make sure we check it out and find out. And we did. And again, as this engineer looked at the original floor plans and then looked at also the additions to the building over the year, the floor plans, in their estimation, there wasn't anything that was built in that way. So it's just a piece where these kinds of things are asked and we answer them. So I appreciate the opportunity to address that this evening as well.
Amy.
So this is kind of just a question about the website. Is there any reason why the frequently asked questions is a PDF and not just a list on a website?
Well, that's because that's how I did it. That's the highly technical answer. And frankly, I did that because I think that there are a number of people who like to print the document, and while it would be printable in the new website fashion, it would also include the headers and things like that. So, creating, and then in addition, I am also and when I do it in a PDF format, I'm also able to create a trail of what we've changed over time. And yes, I could do that, on the website. But in this way, what happens is we have some distinctly different documents, that we used over time, so that we have a historical trail of what questions were added at what time.
Well, from a user's perspective, if I'm looking on my cell phone, I'd much rather see it on a web page, because if you have to pull up a PDF, generally the print is way too small and you have to go through the document differently. But whatever works. If I'm the only one who feels that way, that's...
Yeah, that's a matter of it, and I suppose there'd be a way too we could copy and paste it and then also have a download to PDF button. It's the first time I've gotten that feedback, so I appreciate it, and we can certainly take a look at it. Again, I think the rationale there was just trying to make sure that we could create a document that we could have a historical, piece behind it. And that was the way I chose to do it that day at that time.
Okay, thank you.
I wish I had a more sophisticated answer, but I don't.
So I think just to recap where we started the discussion, so what we knew and understood that the frequently asked questions would be a real living document that we would use to communicate information as we found that the community had more information that they wanted. And so what we as a board reviewed initially was that we knew of the impending $14 million worth of age-related maintenance, and then there was the initial proposal of $12.5 million to do some of the things that could be done in terms of a secure front entrance and some more room for special education and some of those pieces. And what our discussion as a board was, just in light of that amount of money, on top of what we knew the age-related, and that we at that point determined the most cost-effective method would be to go ahead with a new high school. So when we provide this sort of frame of reference for the community in terms of what a total renovation would cost, tonight we did get a little bit into the weeds in terms of some of the details and some of the aspects of a renovation of that magnitude would require. In essence, what we're saying is, in light of what that is obviously a very substantial amount of money, it is still the most cost-effective method approach to move forward with the new high school. So we're just providing that additional frame of reference for our community, but wouldn't necessarily, our dialogue didn't include some of the, more logistical aspects of doing a renovation of that magnitude. And we knew that, just looking at $12.5 million and what that was. So we hope that this is going to provide the community with more of a frame of reference. What I understand them to becoming understanding of is the need for more space, and that's a good thing, that they're at a point where, okay, we understand you need more new space, and so their question around renovation is a very good one and an important one, but one that we as a board had reviewed when we looked at a number of things as part of our master facilities plan.
So beyond the frequently asked questions, how can we, in meeting people in the grocery store, how can we get the word out to help explain this to our constituents and that whole line of reasoning and how we got to this point?
I think, directing, first of all, just explain that, we're talking, more than 50% of new cost. I think in addition, pointing people to the website, we should have the frequently asked questions document updated tomorrow. And then I also plan to write an extended version of the frequently asked question piece on the superintendent's blog in the next day or so. So you can certainly direct people to that. And I think you can also talk to them about how you wrestled during the work sessions with those kinds of things. And I think it's very effective for you to share your perspective as a board member from the work that you did at those work sessions to discuss, what the rationale was moving forward. You were the folks who were at the table, 6 hours worth of work session, reviewing all the different kinds of data, and making the decision that when you take the long view, it is a cost-effective approach. And when we look at all of the different things that the district is looking at over the next decade to 2 decades.
And then in addition, we're very grateful to Philip from the Northfield News because he did quite an expansive piece about the Northfield High School proposal, and there were comments in there that hopefully the community was able to read in terms of Jim Kulseth talking about what the magnitude of a renovation. So again, I think we're just using as many vehicles as we can to get that information. I think as board members we see how extremely effective it is to talk one-on-one with people because they do share that information with others in the community.
It's really important information. We need to find ways of getting it out to as many people as possible, and including maybe Matt, you can add it to your presentation somehow, but that only gets to a few people, and we need something even broader than that.
So just as a reminder, next Monday evening, October 16th, at 7 p.m. in the high school, we have the presentation, and preceding that at 6 p.m., the community is able to come in and actually tour the high school and see some of the issues firsthand. No.
I had a question earlier about open enrollment, and it was my thought that if we're going to have a school under construction for 24 months, and we're going to use portable classrooms, we're probably going to see a decrease in open enrollment come in this direction, which is a significant number. The number is high, and it isn't that they don't have alternatives. They just choose this alternative, and this alternative won't be as good an alternative as maybe the ones that they have outside of Northfield. So that's a consideration also.
Just also like to remind that we, in addition to the tour before next Monday's community presentation, we also have an opportunity for a tour at 6 p.m. this Friday preceding the home football game. And so there's a 6 o'clock tour on this Friday. Then there's also the 6 o'clock tour before the community presentation. And we also have one that Jim, Joel, and I are going to run on a Saturday morning on October 28th at 10 a.m. And all of those tours will meet in the lower cafeteria. So trying to provide, that's another piece that we had heard quite a bit saying, I haven't been in the high school in a long time. I'd like to be able to get in there and see it. And so one of the pieces that's hard about the tours is the fact that people, it isn't, you get to see the space, you get to see a number of things, but it's far more effective to see it when there are students here and see the crowded hallways and some of those. So we did have, Philip Way from the Northfield News had come in and done a tour while students were here. And then also last Friday, Jeff Johnson and Terry Knight from KYMN took a tour with Jim Kulseth and Joel Lear. And so even though we're not able to provide people from the community who are interested in seeing the building that student experience, we did give our local media outlets that opportunity. So again, those tours, and of course people are certainly welcome to join us, and we're looking forward to having a chance to share that with the community as well.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions or comments? Great, good discussion, thank you. So we are that was our final item for information. So our future meetings, Monday, October 23rd, and Monday, November 13th, both at 7 p.m. in the High School Media Center. So with that, I'm sorry.
So is it, I just wanted to clarify, yes, it is. So we have a 6 o'clock actually on the 13th. We want to get here first, right? For the National
It's a
Merits.
couple weeks away, but yes.
Yes, so just as a reminder, Danita will be reminding us that November 13th, 6 p.m. we'll do the
And that's going to happen, I guess, right here.
How many people are being recognized?
Do you know?
I think I don't know if they've heard the commended scholars yet, so I don't have that data tonight.
They be juniors though? Or?
No, they're typically seniors.
Media Center.
Two semifinals, Joe. but the commended scholars, I don't think they've released that yet.
Okay, excellent, thanks, Ellen. Okay, so those are our future meetings. With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.